Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are going to take a look at this small box game, Minotaur. Now, the story of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth and Theseus, that's one of the foundational mythological stories of the entire dungeon crawl genre. So it is a little strange to me that we don't see more games implementing this theme. But let's read a little bit about Minotaur here. Survive the labyrinth and break the curse. This game was designed by Jared Garcia. So this says, you have dared to enter the labyrinth, only to find that the maze changes with almost every step you take. The way out has been sealed off, and the Minotaur patrols these halls, called to the magic of the medallions and those who might steal them. Even if you defeat it in combat, the magic of the labyrinth keeps the beast alive. Your only hope is to assemble the medallions and use their power to seal the Minotaur for good. Will you be able to stop the invincible Minotaur before it hunts you down? This is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, and in this game, the players will be choosing a number of heroes. So if you're playing solo, you need to use 2 heroes, but it's very easy to do. And if you're playing with 4, then each of you will be your own hero. And the heroes are super cool in this game. It's one of my favorite things about this game, and I think it's one of the things that does make this game very interesting and fun to play. So we have characters like the Warlock, the Ranger, the Warrior, the Cleric, the Monk, the Wizard, the Druid, and the Rogue. And each one of these characters has a number of special abilities that they can perform, such as the Warlock can drain. So the Warlock is able to kill creatures and then take their tokens and then use those tokens for healing. He can cast the spell of darkness to defeat a monster, and then he can consume those tokens that he has collected to heal himself or other players. We have the Ranger, who can do a spread fire. It's like an area attack against all the monsters in a single tile. He can take a long shot, or they can do a targeted shot where they can place this target token on a monster that will give everybody who attacks that monster a +1. And then we have the Warrior, who is just really good at bashing stuff. He can go on a berserk or do a crushing attack or a battle cry. And then each of the characters also has 3 normal abilities that aren't special to them that everybody has access to. And those are Disarm, Dispel, and Strength. And during the game, there will be magical barriers that you have to dispel to get rid of in order to make progress through the labyrinth. There will be physical barriers that you have to break down to make progress, and then you can also find and disarm traps. So with all of these different characters and with all of their different special attacks and abilities, and the way that they can handle the traps and the barriers within the labyrinth, by mixing and matching and combining the heroes, you can make for some really cool teams that have synergizing powers and can offset each other's weaknesses. So the character choices in this game make it really interesting and fun to play. So in the game, once you have chosen your characters, your main goal is to defeat the evil Minotaur in the labyrinth. And you do that by collecting 2 halves of 3 different medallions, a red, gold, and blue medallion. And the medallions will be randomly drawn from bags and put out into the labyrinth. And you have to collect 2 halves of each one. And once you complete all 3 of the medallions, you have defeated the Minotaur. Now, the Minotaur in this game is kind of like the Nemesis in Resident Evil 3. He keeps coming back and chases down the players, bashing through walls, bashing through barriers, just trying to kill the heroes and collect the medallions back from the heroes. He wants to steal those medallion halves to prevent the heroes from collecting all 3. So this is the main Nemesis. And depending on how many medallions you've collected during the game, when he spawns, the Minotaur will have a certain amount of health. And he gets more powerful with the more medallions you have collected. So at the beginning of the game, you will select a couple heroes. Let's just do random real quick here. We'll take these 2 heroes there. So we have the Rogue and the Wizard. So the Rogue can backstab, and that's you roll 2 dice and you subtract 2 from a single monster. And when attacking a monster on the same labyrinth card as another hero, then that becomes a +1. So if monsters are distracted, perhaps by the wizard, the rogue gets a bonus to his attack. We have a razor fan, which is a ranged attack, and a cloak, so you can kind of make yourself invisible. And then he's really good at disarming and dispelling, not so good at bashing down brick walls. And neither is the wizard. So these two characters may not be good to pair together because they're both pretty bad at bashing down brick walls. But the wizard has a fireball attack, a lightning bolt attack, and he can banish. And he is also good at disarming and dispelling these magical barriers. So we have our two characters, then we will take our two standees here. So we have our rogue standee and we have our wizard standee. And then we will build the labyrinth. So with a single player game or when you are playing with two heroes, you are working with a 3x3 labyrinth. So you're going to take your start card here and then you will shuffle up all of your labyrinth cards. And these cards are all different kinds of corridors. And they have these skulls that represent spawning points for monsters. And some of these will have stairs leading down into new levels of the labyrinth. But you will take a 3x3 grid. So we'll have 3 cards up top, 2 on the side, and 3 cards at the bottom. And then you take these cards and you kind of try to build a labyrinth with the most connections. Now, they're going to be dead ends. There will be trails leaving off. And one interesting thing about this game, and the reason why it is kind of an old school arcade style game or an old school console style dungeon crawl, is there is actually scrolling as you explore the labyrinth. And as you move from one end or from one edge to the next, the opposite edge will fall off like it's scrolling off the screen. That's actually one of the ways that you can use to get rid of monsters that are on the board. So let's see what kind of labyrinth we can build here. We can start maybe going this way. We have this tile here. Maybe that can go off there. That can go there. We can put that like this. Maybe we can put... So as you can see, sometimes the cards don't necessarily match up. And that is fine because this is a magical labyrinth. There will be dead ends. And there will be other ways to... you will have other opportunities to draw more cards to complete different exits and to complete different connections. So that might be one way that we can start the labyrinth. This would be a dead end. This could lead off, that could lead off, and then that way could lead off there. This stairwell here would be completely blocked off, but hey, that's okay. There will be other stairwells to discover. Now, each of these skulls represents a spawning point for monsters and for items and things. And we have a red bag of tokens and a blue bag of tokens. And each of these will be blue tokens in the blue bag. And you have a whole bunch of different things like portals that can help you go between walls. You will have swords, which are weapons, traps, magical barriers, harpies, balls of yarn, of twine to help find your way. So all kinds of different blue tokens. And then there are also corresponding red tokens. And also in these bags will be the medallion halves that you are trying to find. Here are some skeletons, some normal skeletons, and some elite skeletons. Now, some of the tokens have this black bar, this black band on them. Those are only used for 3 or 4 player games. I don't separate them out at the beginning of the game. I keep everything mixed in. And then if I happen to draw one of those black banded tokens, I just discard it and draw another one. So now we need to spawn a whole bunch of stuff on all of these skulls. Let's start here with this one here. And then here we have our spawn cards, and these will tell us how many tokens get spawned on each skeleton. So we'll draw this one. Okay, so here we have 2 blue tokens and 2 red tokens. So now we can draw from our blue bag here. We can draw 2. Okay, so here we have a black banded trap. We can discard that. We have a ball of twine, and let's draw another one out here. And we have, hey, our first half of a blue medallion. Nice. And then we have 2 red tokens to draw. Okay. So, oh boy, okay, that's rough. 2 elite skeletons. These elite skeletons, they can move twice or attack twice, I believe. They're pretty powerful. And man, you can get beat down pretty quick in this game. This game has some interesting dungeon crawling with some interesting choices. It has some threat management style play. It really does kind of combine a lot of things that I enjoy. Now let's spawn at this skeleton here. So we have 2 blue and 1 red. So I'll draw my 2 blue tokens there. Okay, so we have a barrier and this magical staff. What is that? What does this staff do? This is a banishing light. somebody can pick this up and discard it to cause 3 damage to the Minotaur. So this is a really good way to get rid of a low-powered Minotaur. So that spawns there, and these barriers, they have to connect to an exit. And so an exit can be a edge of a card that leads to another card or off the map here. So we'll put this barrier there. This barrier, you have to dispel the barrier in order to move through that tile, in order to move to this exit. And so the rogue would roll 2 dice to dispel. He rolled an 8. And then you would draw a strength card to see what the strength of that barrier is. That barrier is strength 8. So you have to meet or beat. So if that happened there, then the rogue would have dispelled that barrier and then discarded it. If you were unable to dispel a barrier, you flip it over to its weak side. And then the next turn, the next hero who moves into that tile or on your next turn, then you can just use a basic action to remove that weakened barrier. So it's kind of a nice system there. You can either do it all in one turn or it can take more time. Oops, I accidentally put the barrier back. All right, so there's our barrier. So now we need 1 red token. 1 red spawn here. And we have an elite skeleton, but it is black banded, so we'll discard that. Draw another one, and we have our first half of the gold medallion. Okay, so now I'm going to do the others off camera here. I will spawn here, here, and here. Okay, so everything is spawned and set up, ready for our game to begin. We place our characters on the start tile there. We have a couple new things to look at. So we have this magical ring up here, and that magical ring here says that you get a +1 to all rolls that do not target enemies. And then here we have a sword. So if you pick up the sword, you get a +1 to all rolls that target enemies. And then also we have this Pegasus here. And a Pegasus, you can discard it to ignore all attacks of opportunity on your turn or ignore all damage during the monster phase. We also have these traps here, and these traps do a certain amount of damage to the heroes when they get triggered or when a hero moves out of a tile with a trap in there. So you really want to disarm those traps. And so now it is our turn, and the game is set up in different phases. We have the hero phase and the monster phase. And basically on your hero phase, you can take 2 actions. You can take your basic actions, which are moving, pick up or dropping items, use an item, remove a broken barrier, and you can do all of those, you can do 2 times. And then your magical or your special abilities, you can do 1 time each. So you can't cast Fireball twice in a turn, but you can do Fireball, then Lightning Bolt, or Banish and Fireball, and so on. And so what you're trying to do, of course, is find those medallions. And this game has a lot of choices. And one of the main choices is in item management and how you are carrying and picking up and using your items, because each character can only hold 1 item. So a lot of this game is picking up those medallion halves and moving them and dropping them, picking up other items and using them, and trying to keep those medallion halves on the board in order to find both halves and combine them together. Once you do that, then they move over to the Minotaur board and you don't have to worry about finding those things again. So we might want to take care of this trap here. So maybe we can move down here and pick up this sword and then also maybe bash through this wall here. But remember, both of these characters are pretty bad at bashing through physical walls. We could move over this direction and we could pick up this banishing rod and this half of this gold medallion. And both of my characters are pretty good at dispelling. So we could get rid of this magical barrier there. We have 2 elite skeletons here, and those guys are pretty powerful. They'll move and attack. Here we have the blue medallion. So we might want to try to keep this on the board, because if we move in this direction and we explore here, what happens is all of these things get discarded. So these tiles get discarded, all of the tokens get discarded, and then a new row appears here. So let's just say that happened. I'll show you what would happen. This would be a pretty kind of a big turn, a big way to get rid of a whole bunch of bad stuff. So let's say my rogue with a movement of 2, let's say he was able to move there. Let's say that he had dispelled that on a previous turn by rolling 2 dice and rolled an 8. And then you test your strength there, and the The barrier has a strength of 8, so you would dispel that. And then let's say on his next turn, he would move here. And so we would scroll these off the screen. Everything there gets discarded, including that good thing, that half of a medallion. So that means that we would have to wait until we depleted the entire bag of blue tokens to add that back in when we needed to draw new blue tokens. So that could be a really bad move, but I just wanted to illustrate that you can clear an entire row of cards and enemies. Now you can't clear off the Minotaur. If the Minotaur is on the map, you can't scroll him off the screen. But this would scroll over, and then we would complete the new layer or the new column of the labyrinth here by drawing 3 new cards and then trying to complete as many passages as possible. So we could do that and that and that. And then once again, we would have to spawn new creatures and items and tokens on these spawn points. So here we would spawn 3 red, draw 3 red here, and we would have a harpy, a skeleton, and I accidentally drew 4, and a portal. Okay, and then here we would spawn 2 blue and 1 red. So we'll do 1 red here. We have a normal skeleton. The normal skeletons aren't too powerful. And 2 blue. So we have a barrier with a black band, so we can discard that. We have a blue sword there. And we need 1 more blue and a trap. Okay, so harpies, when they attack, they don't do any damage, but they will steal your items, including your medallions. And then you have to kill them to get those items back. If I had some points of movement or action points left, I could take an attack. And let's say that I had my wizard here, and my wizard wanted to cast a fireball at this skeleton there. So I would roll 1d6. I rolled a 4. Then you would test the strength of that normal skeleton, which is a 3. And I meet or beat that value, and so I would kill that skeleton, thus removing that skeleton from the board. Maybe my rogue wants to attack that harpy there, and I could use my backstab at a -2. So that would be a 3, probably not enough to attack that harpy, and so on. If you were to attack a skeleton and you weren't able to meet or beat, they would retaliate by doing damage back to you of the difference between the 2 values, and so on. But yeah, this game is pretty cool. There are a lot of interesting choices to be made because you have 2 actions, and on those actions, you can take those basic actions like moving and picking up items. So you do need to kind of be these pack mules where you are picking up items and moving them to tiles, dropping them to pick up other tiles. These are other items. These portals act as magical portals between 2 tiles. So you could place this portal there, and then that would allow this to become a passage, thus negating that wall. You can't use portals past magical barriers or wall or the physical barriers, but the wall labyrinths you can, or the labyrinth walls you can. So knowing when to pick up an item, knowing when to use an item, knowing when to use your special abilities and your normal abilities. And at certain points during the game, whenever you explore a new section of the labyrinth, whenever there are no monsters, no skeletons or harpies on the board, or whenever you go downstairs, and when you go down the stairs, you kind of clear off everything and you start with a new start tile. But whenever those things happen, you have to check for the presence of the Minotaur. And you do that by drawing one of the spawn cards, and you check to see how many medallions you have completed. If you have completed 0 medallions, then you look down here and the Minotaur spawns with 2 health. If you have completed 1 medallion, the Minotaur would spawn with 3 health. If you've completed 2 medallions, the Minotaur spawns with 6 health. And those do fluctuate because there are sometimes 2, 6, 8, 1, 2, 6, 2, 6, 8, and sometimes you will see a 0. So that means that the Minotaur doesn't spawn. So the Minotaur is kind of always hounding you. He's always spawning at inopportune moments, chasing you down. The Minotaur can bash through physical barriers, no problem. The enemies move usually it's a pretty normal movement. They will move 1 or 2 spaces depending on if they are a normal skeleton or an elite skeleton. But sometimes the enemies might be trapped in areas that don't connect. And this is one thing where the game is a little fiddly, and I have a feeling it was just kind of a patch to make the game work and not so much a thematic decision on part of the designers, but the enemies know of shortcuts in the labyrinth. This is their labyrinth. So they aren't affected by traps and they know shortcuts. So the enemies can actually use shortcuts in between black walls. So if this skeleton was here, he could use his turn to move to this black wall, thus simulating that he has found and used a shortcut in between those two tiles. So you're never really safe from the enemies if they are blocked off, but it does kind of slow them down as it is slower to use those shortcuts. So this game is not a game of great epic stories. It's not a game of finding loot and having non-combat encounters. This is very much an arcade style game. Something very similar to Gauntlet or something like that, or a very basic kind of very old school dungeon crawl that you might have found on the Commodore 64 or maybe the ColecoVision or something like that. But what does make it interesting is utilizing those items, knowing when to pick up items, when to drop them, when to switch them out in your inventory, knowing when and where to spawn the Minotaur when it does come out, leading the Minotaur away from certain tiles and spacing properly, knowing when to use your special abilities and how to use them, how to combine, how to create parties that synergize well with each other. You know, you really don't want this wizard and this rogue together because you will have a really hard time breaking down these physical barriers. So you might want to pair the warrior and the wizard. That's always one of my favorite combinations. The warlock is cool for a hero or for a healer. Same as I believe it was the cleric. There was one other healer. Yeah, the cleric as well. So you might want to take a healer with you. But I think this game is pretty fun. It all fits in a really small box. It has interesting gameplay. It has interesting choices. It can be difficult. It has some threat management. It has some exploration, some pretty good combat, some interesting characters with interesting abilities that are fun to use. It sets up pretty quickly. You can put it away quickly. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it's a small box, so it's easy to store. It's kind of a no-brainer game. A game like this, I took a chance on. I had never really heard of this company before or hadn't heard anything about the game, but I thought, hey, small box, small price, let's take a chance. And I am glad I did, and I'm really happy to add it to my small box collection. I think it's a worthy game to own and play. It is very fun. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at Minotaur, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.